The Battle of Route Coloniale 4 was a battle of the First Indochina War. It took place along Route Coloniale 4, a road which was used to supply the French military base at Caubang. French military traffic along the road had previously been subject to an ongoing series of ambushes during 1947 to 1949. The battle lasted from the 30th of September to the 18th of October 1950 and resulted in a French defeat. Several units of the French army, including some battalions of the Foreign Legion, were devastated by the Viet Minh and essentially ceased to exist as fighting units. RC4 in the First Indochina War. During the French Indochina War, French forces attempted to re-establish colonial control of Vietnam, while nationalist forces led by Ho Chi Minh fought for independence. Initially, the Vietnamese guerrilla forces, the Viet Minh People's Army of Vietnam, were unsuccessful in dealing with the better trained and equipped French forces. Their situation improved in 1949 after the Chinese Communist Army of Mao Zedong defeated the nationalist army led by Chiang Kai-shek. This gave the VPA forces, now almost completely made up of members of the Vietnam Communist Party, a safe haven for organization and training, as well as an initially sympathetic ally to provide them with arms and logistical support. Though Nguyen Giap, the military leader of the VPA, launched an offensive against the French in early 1950. From February to April, his Operation La Hong Phong I developed through the Red River Valley, largely giving the Viet Minh control of northwestern Tonkin, near the Chinese border. The area became a Viet Minh stronghold, except for the RC4 highway. On the 25th of May, 2,500 VPA troops overwhelmed the French fortress at Dong Khe Acute, which lay at the strategic center of RC4, thus cutting the supply line between the French positions at Caubang and Lang Son. French paratroops retook Dong Khe Acute on the evening of the 27th of May and a company of legionnaires took charge of the fort. Meanwhile, the VPA regular army grew in size and experience. By the beginning of September, it comprised roughly 100,000 combatants in 70 battalions, with another 33 battalions of regional forces as well as some 60,000 local support personnel. GIAP then began harassing French positions along RC4 in northern Vietnam with mines and ambushes. The French responded by dismantling their small posts along the road and concentrating area forces in the fortified positions at Dong Khe Acute and Cao Bang. GIAP planned to launch another assault on French positions in Operation La Hong Phong II. On the 16th of September, 5 VPA infantry and 1 heavy weapons battalions attacked Dong Khe. It was then garrisoned by some 300 French troops comprising the 5th and 6th Companies of the 2nd Battalion of the 3rd Regiment of the French Foreign Legion. On the 18th of September, the fort was overrun after bitter fighting, and only 12 survivors escaped to the nearby post at That Khe Acute. 140 legionnaires had been taken prisoner, the remainder being killed or missing in action. That Khe was quickly reinforced by the Foreign Legion's 1st Parachute Battalion, which parachuted in on the 17th of September. The 1st BEP waited at That Khe while a force of French colonial troops, the Moroccan 1st and 11th Tabors, assembled at Lang Son. Designated Groupement Bayard. The combined force comprised 3,500 men under the command of Colonel Lepage. The task force launched an intelligence raid, capturing prisoners who said a massive Viet Minh offensive was planned. Meanwhile, General Marcel Carpentier, the commander-in-chief of French Indochina, decided to evacuate Caubang. The commander of the Caubang fort, Colonel Charton, was ordered to destroy his heavy equipment and motor transport and evacuate towards Dong Khe Acute. The plan was that Groupement Bayard would fight its way north from That Khe and retake Dong Khe Acute, holding it long enough to link up with the Caubang group. This group comprised 2,600 troops and 500 civilians, the latter mostly pro-French Thai partisans and their families. Battle of RC4. On the 30th of September, Groupement Bayard set out from that KHE, led by the 1 BEP. However, GIAP had concentrated 10 battalions around Dong Khe Acute, reinforced by a complete artillery regiment. Together with the remaining forces from La Hongfong, the Viet Minh rebuffed the French forces, which were forced to pull back and wait for air support. Lepage renewed the attack on the 2nd of October, pushing west to bypass Dong Khe Acute as Viet Minh numbers were overwhelming. Meanwhile, Colonel Chartin's group, led by the 3rd Battalion of 3rd REI, left Cao Bang on the 1st of October, contrary to orders he took with him and his heavy equipment. The group's movement down RC4 was slowed by Viet Minh ambushes. After bitter fighting, they finally abandoned their heavy equipment and linked up with Groupement Bayard in the hills around Dong Khe Acute on the 5th of October. The French forces were driven into the Coxa Gorge, where they were completely annihilated by the 7th of October. Martin Windrow notes that some 130 of the Legion Parachute Battalion out of the 500 that had jumped emerged from this breakthrough fight. They had only escaped by clambering down lianas shrouding a 75 feet cliff with their wounded tied on their backs. In an attempt to support the embattled troops, the 1st BEP Replacement Company under Lieutenant Loth had been merged with 268 men from 3rd BCCP, under Captain Cazo, and they were parachuted into that KHE on the 8th of October. But over the course of the next week were destroyed as well. Only 23 survivors of the 1st BEP, led by Captain Jean-Pierre, managed to escape to French lines. It became the first French parachute battalion lost in combat, followed by the 3rd BCCP, of which only 14 soldiers returned unscathed. Aftermath of the more than 6,000 French soldiers and civilians involved in the operation, only 700 reached French lines. Lang Son, the next French base to the south, was abandoned on the 17th of October, and on the 18th of October the French command evacuated posts south of Lang Son on RC4. Panic spread in French-controlled Hanoi and there was talk of an evacuation. Ultimately, however, General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny replaced Carpentier as Commander-in-Chief of French Indochina in late 1950 and restored French morale.